Hey there. Tonight we're talking about how a merchant's daughter in ancient times uncovered forgotten trade routes that had been used by civilizations lost to history. Routes that didn't just connect distant lands, but actually channeled currents of abundance that could transform anyone who understood their secrets into a conduit for prosperity that flowed like rivers of gold through invisible pathways, connecting every corner of the known world and beyond into realms where wealth moved according to patterns more ancient and reliable than the turning of seasons. Before you drift off, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if this kind of transformative deep sleep hypnosis speaks to you. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and how many days in a row you've been on this manifestation journey. I love seeing how committed this community is becoming. Now dim the lights, get comfortable, and let your mind absorb abundance. In the gentle embrace of a Mediterranean summer evening, when the warm breeze carries scents of jasmine and sea salt across ancient cobblestone streets that have witnessed the passage of countless merchants, traders, and seekers of fortune throughout the centuries, you find yourself drawn into the story of Celestine, a young woman whose insatiable curiosity about the mysterious symbols carved into weathered stones along forgotten pathways would lead her to discoveries that challenged everything the known world believed about trade, prosperity, and the invisible forces that govern how wealth flows between distant lands like underground rivers, connecting oases across vast deserts of ordinary commerce and conventional understanding. The setting sun paints the harbor town in shades of gold and amber, its rays illuminating ancient warehouses where spices from distant continents mingle their fragrances with the clean salt air, creating an atmosphere that seems pregnant with possibility and adventure. While merchant ships bob gently at anchor, their holds filled with treasures from lands so remote that their names exist only in the oldest maps and the stories whispered by elderly sailors who claim to have glimpsed shores where different laws of abundance operate according to principles that transform simple trade into something approaching alchemy, where goods multiply in value not through scarcity and manipulation, but through alignment with currents of prosperity that flow through the world like invisible rivers carrying wealth to those who understand how to navigate by stars that shine only for eyes trained to perceive the deeper patterns underlying all successful commerce and exchange. The ancient trading post where Celestine has spent her entire life learning the practical aspects of commerce from her father, a respected merchant whose reputation extends throughout the known Mediterranean world, occupies a unique position at the confluence of multiple trade routes that have been traveled for thousands of years by successive civilizations, each one adding their own discoveries and wisdom to the accumulated knowledge of how goods, ideas, and prosperity move across vast distances according to patterns that seem to operate independently of human planning or control, as if the very landscape itself remembers the pathways that served ancient peoples and continues to channel abundance through these routes for those who possess the sensitivity to detect and utilize the invisible currents that transform ordinary trade into extraordinary wealth creation. As evening settles over the bustling marketplace with its exotic displays of silks from distant lands, spices that carry the essence of far-off mountains and valleys, precious metals that gleam with inner fire, and artifacts whose origins remain mysterious even to the most experienced traders, you can feel the accumulated energy of centuries of successful commerce creating an atmosphere where prosperity seems to hang in the very air, like mist rising from warm earth after summer rain, waiting to be absorbed by anyone whose consciousness has been prepared through understanding and experience to recognize and work with the subtle forces that determine whether individual ventures result in modest success or extraordinary abundance that exceeds all reasonable expectations and transforms not just personal circumstances, but entire family lineages for generations to come. As the Mediterranean summer evening deepens into that magical hour when ordinary reality becomes more flexible and permeable to influences that operate beyond the boundaries of conventional understanding, you find yourself walking alongside Celestine through narrow streets that wind between buildings constructed from stones, quarried by civilizations whose names have been lost to history, but whose understanding of prosperity consciousness remains encoded in the very architecture of this ancient trading center. Each weathered block placed according to principles that create subtle energy flows designed to enhance commercial success and attract abundance from sources that extend far beyond the visible networks of ships' caravans and trading relationships that constitute the apparent foundation of all mercantile activity in this bustling harbor town. The cobblestones beneath her feet carry the imprint of countless merchants who have walked these same paths over millennia, their footsteps gradually wearing grooves that serve as channels for currents of commercial energy that continue to influence the success rates of modern traders who unconsciously follow patterns established by ancient masters of abundance creation. Masters whose knowledge of how prosperity flows through physical and metaphysical dimensions allowed them to create trade networks that generated wealth, far exceeding what conventional economic theories would predict possible through simple buying and selling of material goods according to supply and demand principles that ignore the deeper forces governing how value is created, recognized, and exchanged throughout complex systems that extend beyond visible transactions to encompass reputation trust, timing, intuition, and alignment with currents of abundance that move through the world like underground rivers, accessible only to those who develop the sensitivity and understanding necessary to detect and navigate by these invisible streams of prosperity consciousness. The ancient symbols carved into walls and door frames throughout the trading district create a visual language that seems to communicate directly with some deeper level of awareness that operates beyond conscious comprehension. Each mark and line contributing to a comprehensive system of abundance attraction that transforms the entire area into a kind of three-dimensional mandala designed to focus and amplify the natural human capacity for creating wealth through understanding how individual intention harmonizes with universal principles governing the flow of resources, opportunities, and beneficial relationships that support commercial success on scales ranging from simple daily transactions to vast international networks that connect cultures, continents, and economic systems in patterns of mutual benefit that create expanding spirals of prosperity for all participants who approach trade with wisdom, integrity, and recognition of the interconnected nature of all abundance creation throughout complex webs of relationship and exchange that extend infinitely beyond what any single individual can comprehend or control through personal effort alone. As Celestine pauses to examine a particularly intricate symbol carved into a cornerstone that marks the entrance to one of the oldest sections of the marketplace, running her fingers along grooves worn smooth by centuries of weather and the unconscious touching of countless merchants who somehow sensed that these markings contained valuable information about commercial success, you observe how her touch seems to activate dormant energies within the ancient stone, causing subtle patterns of light to flicker briefly across its surface in ways that suggest the presence of technologies or consciousness. Enhancing installations that operate according to principles unknown to conventional archaeology, but familiar to traditions of wisdom that understand how matter and awareness interact to create environments that naturally support specific types of human development and achievement. The marketplace around them pulses with the accumulated energy of thousands of years of successful commerce, each stall and shop contributing to an overall atmosphere that seems designed to facilitate not just the exchange of goods, but the transmission of knowledge, wisdom, and abundance consciousness between merchants who represent different cultures, traditions, and approaches to creating prosperity through understanding how individual capability harmonizes with universal forces that govern the distribution of resources throughout complex systems that operate according to patterns more sophisticated than anything achieved by modern economic theories or business schools. The evening air carries fragrances that tell stories of distant lands and successful trading ventures. Cardamom and cinnamon from mountain kingdoms, where spice gardens flourish in conditions that seem impossible according to conventional agriculture. Frankincense and myrrh from desert regions, where ancient wisdom traditions developed techniques for finding and utilizing hidden springs of abundance that flow beneath apparent scarcity. Precious woods whose complex aromatics speak of forests where trees grow, according to principles that create materials more valuable than gold for those who understand their proper applications in creating environments that enhance consciousness and attract prosperity from sources that extend beyond ordinary supply chains to encompass currents of abundance that move through dimensions invisible to conventional perception, but accessible to awareness that has been refined through understanding and experience in working with the subtle forces underlying all sustainable wealth creation. As Celestine continues her evening exploration of the ancient symbols and energy patterns woven throughout the fabric of this extraordinary trading center, you observe how her awareness naturally attunes to frequencies and information streams that remain invisible to ordinary consciousness, but become increasingly clear and accessible to anyone who approaches the study of abundance creation with the patience, dedication, and open-minded curiosity that characterizes true students of prosperity consciousness. Students who understand that sustainable wealth emerges not from competition and manipulation, but from alignment with natural principles that govern how universal intelligence organizes resources and opportunities to support the development and expression of individual talents and capabilities in service of outcomes that benefit not just personal circumstances, but the collective advancement of everyone whose lives intersect with expanding circles of influence generated by consciousness that has learned to work harmoniously with cosmic forces rather than against them. The symbols seem to respond to her focused attention by revealing layers of meaning that become available only when approached with the proper combination of intellectual understanding and intuitive sensitivity. Each carved mark serving as a gateway to information about specific aspects of abundance creation that were discovered and refined by successive generations of merchant philosophers who understood that true prosperity involves much more than accumulating material possessions and requires instead the development of consciousness capacities that allow individuals to perceive and work with the invisible currents of opportunity, resource availability, and beneficial synchronicity that constitute the actual foundation underlying all sustainable commercial success. The ancient stones of the trading district seem to have absorbed and slowly released wisdom about prosperity consciousness that was accumulated through centuries of practical experimentation by merchants who understood that successful commerce involves working with subtle energies and invisible forces that determine whether specific ventures result in modest returns or extraordinary abundance that transforms entire family lineages and creates beneficial effects that ripple outward through communities and cultures for generations beyond the original commercial activities that initiated these expanding cycles of prosperity and mutual benefit. As evening light fades and torches begin to illuminate the winding pathways between shops and stalls, the carved symbols become even more visible and active, their patterns seeming to pulse with gentle rhythms that synchronize with the natural heartbeat and breathing patterns of anyone who spends time in contemplation of their meanings and implications, for understanding how individual consciousness can align with universal principles of abundance creation to generate outcomes that exceed logical predictions based on conventional analysis of market conditions, supply chains, competitive factors, and other variables that constitute the visible surface of commercial activity, while ignoring the deeper currents that actually determine whether specific enterprises achieve mediocre results or breakthrough success that establishes new standards for what becomes possible when human creativity and determination harmonize with cosmic forces that support evolution and development throughout all levels of existence. The evening air grows cooler and more fragrant as night-blooming flowers begin to open their petals to release perfumes that have been treasured by traders throughout history for their ability to enhance clarity of thought, depth of intuition, and sensitivity to the subtle signals that guide successful decision-making in complex commercial environments, where numerous variables interact in ways that cannot be predicted through analytical thinking alone, but require instead the kind of holistic perception that emerges when consciousness learns to balance rational analysis with intuitive awareness of patterns, timing, and energetic factors that determine optimal moments for initiating new ventures, adjusting existing strategies, or recognizing opportunities that might appear unremarkable to conventional analysis, but contain potential for extraordinary results when approached with proper understanding and preparation. As Celestine pauses beside a fountain carved with symbols depicting ancient trade routes that connected this Mediterranean hub with civilizations throughout the known world and beyond into realms whose existence was understood only by the most accomplished merchant explorers who combined commercial acumen with mystical sensitivity to currents of abundance that flow through dimensions invisible to ordinary perception. You observe how the sound of flowing water creates acoustic patterns that seem to activate dormant information encoded in the surrounding stone architecture, causing the carved symbols to exhibit subtle changes in appearance that suggest the presence of consciousness-responsive technologies developed by ancient civilizations whose understanding of prosperity creation far exceeded anything achieved by modern economic systems. The fountain itself serves as more than decorative water feature, functioning as a sophisticated device for demonstrating principles of abundance flow through its carefully calculated hydraulic patterns that mirror the ways prosperity moves through human consciousness and social systems when conditions are properly aligned to support natural currents of wealth creation rather than artificial restrictions based on scarcity, consciousness, and competitive paradigms that ignore the infinite abundance available when individual awareness harmonizes with universal intelligence that organizes resources according to principles of mutual benefit and evolutionary advancement. The water flows in spirals and cascades that create hypnotic visual patterns while generating sound frequencies that naturally induce states of consciousness conducive to enhanced perception of opportunity, improved decision-making capabilities, and increased sensitivity to the subtle timing factors that determine whether specific actions result in modest success or breakthrough achievements that transform entire trajectories of personal and commercial development according to principles that operate beyond ordinary cause and effect relationships to encompass synchronicity, serendipity, and alignment with currents of beneficial change that move through reality, like invisible rivers carrying boats to shores that represent fulfillment of purposes and potentials that may have seemed impossible from conventional perspectives, but become natural and inevitable when consciousness learns to navigate by patterns that govern abundance manifestation throughout all levels of existence. As the evening continues to deepen and stars begin to appear in the darkening sky above the ancient trading center, you notice how the accumulated energy of centuries of successful commerce seems to intensify and become more accessible to direct perception, as if the approaching night creates conditions that enhance sensitivity to subtle forces and invisible currents that operate continuously but become more noticeable when ordinary mental activity begins to quiet, and awareness naturally shifts into receptive states that can detect and interpret the constant flow of information about abundance, opportunities that surrounds all human activity, like an ocean of possibility waiting to be recognized and utilized by consciousness that has developed sufficient refinement and sensitivity to work with these subtle but powerful influences. The carved symbols throughout the district begin to exhibit even more obvious responses to focused attention, their patterns seeming to shift and reorganize themselves to reveal different layers of information depending on the specific questions or concerns that occupy the observer's consciousness, demonstrating interactive capabilities that suggest these ancient installations were designed not simply as static decorations, but as dynamic educational systems capable of transmitting knowledge about prosperity creation through direct consciousness interface rather than conventional, verbal, or written instruction, allowing each individual to receive information specifically relevant to their unique circumstances, capabilities, and developmental requirements for advancing along personal pathways of abundance creation and contribution to collective prosperity consciousness. As the Mediterranean night settles more deeply over the ancient trading center, with its layers of accumulated prosperity wisdom woven into every stone and carved symbol, you find yourself following Celestine as she moves with increasing confidence and purposefulness through pathways that seem to respond to her growing understanding of the invisible forces that have guided successful merchants throughout history by creating currents of abundance that flow like underground rivers through networks of relationship, reputation, timing, and energetic alignment with principles that govern how universal intelligence organizes resources and opportunities to support individual development while contributing to collective advancement of consciousness and capability throughout interconnected webs of exchange that extend far beyond simple commercial transactions to encompass the transmission of knowledge, wisdom, cultural understanding, and evolutionary impulses that use trade networks as vehicles for spreading beneficial influences throughout civilizations and across generations in patterns that create expanding spirals of mutual benefit and shared prosperity. The ancient symbols that line the pathways between shops and stalls have become increasingly responsive to her presence, their carved patterns exhibiting subtle luminescence that seems to emanate from within the stone itself, suggesting the presence of consciousness, responsive technologies, that were integrated into the architecture by builders who understood principles of energy manipulation and information storage that far exceed anything achieved by conventional construction techniques, but remain perfectly functional for those who possess sufficient sensitivity and understanding to activate and utilize these sophisticated abundance enhancement installations that continue operating according to their original programming, despite centuries of neglect and misunderstanding by generations of merchants who benefited from their influence without recognizing the source of their enhanced commercial success. The evening air carries increasingly complex fragrances that seem to encode specific information about abundance creation through olfactory patterns that communicate directly with deep levels of consciousness, where understanding happens through resonance and recognition rather than analytical thinking. Each scent carrying compressed knowledge about different aspects of prosperity consciousness that can be absorbed through simple attention and appreciation, while walking through environments where these natural teaching systems have been carefully cultivated and maintained by successive generations of wisdom keepers who understood that sustainable abundance emerges through harmonious relationship with natural forces rather than domination or manipulation of circumstances through willpower and aggressive effort alone. As Celestine pauses to examine a section of wall where dozens of symbols create complex, interlocking patterns that seem to map entire networks of trade relationships, extending throughout the ancient world and beyond into realms whose existence was known only to the most accomplished merchant explorers who combined commercial expertise with mystical understanding of how consciousness and matter interact to create experiences of greater or lesser abundance, depending on alignment with universal principles governing energy flow, resource distribution, and the manifestation of potential through focused intention supported by wisdom, skill, and ethical commitment to outcomes that serve not just personal benefit, but collective advancement of prosperity consciousness throughout all communities, touched by expanding influence of individuals who have learned to work harmoniously with cosmic intelligence. The cobblestone pathways beneath their feet have been worn smooth by countless merchants who unknowingly followed routes established according to sacred geometry and energy flow principles that create optimal conditions for commercial success by aligning physical movement with subtle currents of abundance that move through the Earth's energy grid system like circulation patterns in a vast organism designed to distribute resources and opportunities according to needs, readiness, and capacity for utilizing wealth in ways that serve evolution and development rather than stagnation and corruption through accumulation without wisdom or purpose beyond personal gratification and ego enhancement. Each step along these ancient pathways creates subtle activation of dormant potentials within human consciousness that naturally enhance perception of opportunity, improve timing of decisions, and increase sensitivity to the quality and character of potential trading partners, customers, and collaborative relationships that determine whether specific commercial ventures result in mediocre outcomes or extraordinary success that exceeds all reasonable expectations based on conventional analysis of market conditions, competitive factors, and available resources, demonstrating how alignment with invisible support systems can multiply individual capabilities and generate results that appear miraculous from ordinary perspectives, but represent natural consequences of working harmoniously with universal intelligence, rather than struggling against natural patterns through ignorance of how abundance actually flows through reality, according to principles more reliable than gravity and more consistent than seasonal cycles. As they continue deeper into the oldest section of the trading district, where the most ancient symbols and energy-responsive installations concentrate in patterns that create a natural laboratory for studying and experimenting with forces that govern prosperity, creation, and sustainable wealth development. You observe how Celestine's awareness continues expanding to encompass increasingly subtle levels of information about how individual consciousness can align with cosmic intelligence to generate outcomes that serve both personal fulfillment and collective benefit through understanding and application of principles that were discovered and refined by generations of merchant philosophers who recognized that true prosperity involves much more than accumulating material possessions, and requires instead the development of wisdom, capability, and character sufficient to handle expanded resources and opportunities without becoming corrupted by power or losing connection with values and purposes that ensure abundance serves evolution rather than devolution according to natural laws that reward wisdom and service while naturally correcting imbalances created through ignorance, selfishness, or misuse of abundance-creating technologies and techniques. The symbols surrounding them pulse with increasing complexity and beauty as night deepens, and consciousness naturally becomes more receptive to subtle influences that operate continuously but become more noticeable when ordinary mental activity quiets and awareness shifts into states that can detect and work with the constant flow of guidance, opportunity, and beneficial synchronicity that surrounds all human activity, like an ocean of supportive intelligence waiting to be recognized and cooperated with through understanding and appreciation. The ancient architecture itself seems designed to facilitate this expansion of awareness and sensitivity to abundance-creating forces through its careful integration of acoustic properties, visual patterns, energetic alignments, and consciousness-responsive materials that work together to create environments where natural human capacities for prosperity creation are automatically enhanced and supported without requiring special training or exotic practices beyond simple attention, appreciation, and willingness to learn from direct experience rather than limiting understanding to conventional theories and assumptions about how wealth is created, distributed, and maintained throughout economic systems that ignore the deeper forces actually governing resource flow and opportunity distribution according to principles that ensure optimal outcomes for individual development and collective advancement when consciousness achieves sufficient clarity and coherence to work harmoniously with universal intelligence, rather than struggling against natural patterns through ignorance of how reality actually operates at its most fundamental levels. As Celestine approaches a circular plaza, where 7 ancient pathways converge around a central platform carved with symbols that seem to map the entire network of trade routes connecting this Mediterranean hub with distant lands throughout the known world and beyond, you can sense the presence of sophisticated technologies or consciousness enhancement installations that operate according to principles unknown to conventional archaeology, but familiar to wisdom, traditions that understand how matter and awareness collaborate to create environments specifically designed to support human development along particular pathways of growth and achievement. The central platform serves as more than simple meeting place for merchants to conduct business, functioning as a sophisticated device for demonstrating and teaching principles of abundance creation through its geometric patterns, acoustic properties, and energetic alignments that automatically induce states of consciousness conducive to enhanced perception, improved decision-making, and increased sensitivity to the subtle factors that determine optimal timing, resource allocation, and collaborative relationships necessary for achieving extraordinary results that exceed predictions based on conventional analysis of market conditions and competitive factors, while serving purposes that extend beyond personal benefit to encompass contribution to collective prosperity, consciousness, and evolutionary advancement throughout communities and cultures that benefit from expanded abundance flowing through networks of relationship and exchange established by individuals who understand how to align personal capabilities with universal principles governing wealth creation and resource distribution. The 7 pathways that radiate outward from this central hub correspond to different aspects of abundance, consciousness, and various approaches to prosperity creation that were developed and refined by ancient trading civilizations, whose understanding of commercial success integrated practical skills with mystical sensitivity to forces that operate beyond ordinary perception, but determine whether specific ventures achieve modest results or breakthrough success that transforms entire trajectories of personal and cultural development according to patterns that serve evolution rather than devolution through accumulation without wisdom or purpose. As evening transforms into deep night and the plaza becomes illuminated by torches whose flickering flames create dancing patterns of light and shadow that enhance the visibility and apparent activity of the carved symbols throughout the ancient trading center, you witness how Celestine's growing attunement to these abundance-creating forces begins attracting obvious manifestations of increased opportunity, beneficial synchronicity, and resource availability that demonstrate through direct experience how consciousness development translates immediately into practical improvements in circumstances and capabilities for creating sustainable prosperity through alignment with natural principles, rather than struggle against universal patterns through ignorance of how abundance actually flows through reality, according to laws that govern energy, information, and manifestation throughout all levels of existence, from quantum field fluctuations through individual psychology to collective economic systems and beyond into cosmic intelligence networks that coordinate resource distribution throughout inhabited worlds according to evolutionary requirements and readiness for handling expanded capabilities and responsibilities that come with increased access to abundance-creating technologies and techniques. The symbols carved into the platform seem to respond to her presence and growing understanding by revealing additional layers of information about specific trade routes, timing factors, and partnership opportunities that become available when consciousness achieves sufficient refinement and coherence to detect and utilize the constant flow of guidance and support that operates through dimensions invisible to ordinary perception but accessible to awareness that has developed appropriate sensitivity through study, practice, and direct experimentation with principles governing prosperity, creation, and sustainable wealth development. The night air carries increasingly exotic fragrances that seem to originate from lands and dimensions beyond the ordinary geographical boundaries of the known world, suggesting the presence of trade networks and abundance-creating systems that extend through multiple levels of reality, including physical, energetic, and consciousness dimensions, where different principles of resource generation and distribution operate according to laws that transcend conventional economics to encompass synchronicity, manifestation, and alignment with cosmic intelligence that organizes matter and energy to support optimal development for individual beings and collective civilizations throughout evolutionary cycles that extend across vast periods of time and include capabilities for prosperity, creation that far exceed anything imagined by current economic theories or business practices. As Celestine settles into meditation beside the central platform, positioning herself to receive maximum benefit from the accumulated wisdom and abundance-enhancing energies that have been focused and amplified by generations of successful merchants who understood how to work harmoniously with these ancient technologies. You observe how the entire plaza begins exhibiting increasingly obvious responses to her deepening awareness, with all the carved symbols throughout the area pulsing in synchronized patterns that create visual demonstrations of how individual consciousness development influences collective abundance levels and resource availability for entire communities through mechanisms that operate beyond ordinary cause and effect relationships to encompass energetic resonance, morphic field effects, and alignment with universal intelligence networks that coordinate prosperity, consciousness development throughout interconnected systems of relationship and exchange. In the profound stillness of the Mediterranean night, when ancient energies that have accumulated for millennia within the carved stones and sacred geometries of this extraordinary trading center become most accessible to consciousness that has prepared itself through understanding and appreciation to receive direct transmission of wisdom about abundance, creation, and sustainable prosperity development. You find yourself witnessing the emergence of Celestine's deepening communion with intelligence networks that extend far beyond the visible boundaries of conventional commerce to encompass systems of resource distribution, opportunity coordination, and collective consciousness evolution that operate throughout dimensions invisible to ordinary perception, but fundamental to understanding how true wealth is generated, maintained, and shared according to principles that ensure optimal outcomes for individual development and species-wide advancement toward greater levels of wisdom, creativity, and collaborative capability in service of universal intelligence that seeks expression through beings who have developed sufficient refinement and coherence to serve as conscious participants in cosmic abundance creation, rather than unconscious consumers of resources generated through exploitation, competition, and artificial scarcity paradigms that ignore the infinite wealth available when consciousness aligns with natural patterns of energy flow, information exchange, and creative collaboration that characterize reality at its most fundamental levels, where abundance represents the normal condition, rather than exceptional achievement, requiring struggle, sacrifice, or victory over others in zero-sum games that assume resources are limited and must be hoarded, defended, or stolen, rather than continuously created through understanding and application of principles governing manifestation, multiplication, and generous sharing of whatever prosperity emerges through harmonious relationship with cosmic intelligence. The circular plaza, with its radiating pathways and central platform carved with symbols mapping ancient trade networks throughout the known world and beyond, has become a living demonstration of how individual consciousness development influences collective abundance levels through resonance effects that propagate through invisible networks, connecting all beings who share similar values, purposes, and commitment to outcomes that serve not just personal benefit, but mutual advancement of prosperity, consciousness throughout communities, cultures, and civilizations that benefit from expanded resource availability generated by individuals who understand how to align personal capabilities with universal principles governing wealth creation and distribution, according to patterns that ensure continued evolution toward greater levels of wisdom, compassion, and creative expression in service of purposes that transcend individual limitations to encompass collective flourishing and species-wide development toward states of consciousness capable of handling unlimited abundance without corruption or loss of connection with values that ensure prosperity serves spiritual advancement rather than ego inflation or power accumulation for selfish purposes that ultimately limit rather than expand individual and collective potential for achieving fulfillment through meaningful contribution to evolutionary advancement throughout interconnected webs of relationship and exchange that extend infinitely beyond current comprehension, but operate according to discoverable principles that can be learned, practiced, and mastered through dedicated study and practical application of abundance consciousness in daily life circumstances. As Celestine's awareness continues expanding to encompass increasingly subtle levels of the intelligence networks that coordinate resource flow and opportunity distribution throughout complex systems that operate simultaneously across physical, energetic, and consciousness dimensions, you observe how the ancient symbols throughout the plaza begin exhibiting sophisticated interactive behaviors that demonstrate capabilities for real-time communication with sources of information about trade opportunities, market conditions, timing factors, and partnership possibilities that extend throughout the entire Mediterranean region and beyond into lands whose existence remains unknown to conventional geography, but accessible to consciousness that has developed sufficient sensitivity to detect and navigate by currents of abundance that flow through dimensions parallel to ordinary physical reality, while maintaining constant influence over material circumstances through mechanisms that operate faster than light and more subtly than any known form of electromagnetic or mechanical transmission. The carved patterns pulse with increasing complexity and beauty as they display continuously updated information about commercial opportunities that become available when individual consciousness achieves sufficient coherence and ethical alignment to participate in abundance networks that operate according to principles of mutual benefit and collective advancement rather than competition, exploitation, or zero-sum thinking that limits wealth creation to redistribution of existing resources, rather than continuous generation of new value through creative collaboration and alignment with cosmic intelligence that organizes matter and energy to support optimal development for all participants in evolutionary processes that extend throughout inhabited worlds and beyond into dimensions where consciousness and abundance exist in states of perfect unity and infinite creative expression. The night atmosphere around the plaza has become charged with energies that seem to originate from multiple dimensions simultaneously, creating conditions where ordinary limitations of space, time, and causality become more flexible and permeable to influences that operate according to principles of synchronicity, manifestation, and alignment with universal intelligence networks that coordinate abundance creation throughout reality according to patterns that ensure perfect timing, optimal resource allocation, and ideal partnership formations for achieving outcomes that exceed anything possible through individual effort alone, while serving purposes that contribute to collective prosperity, consciousness, development, and evolutionary advancement toward states of existence where abundance and wisdom achieve perfect integration in service of cosmic creative expression. As these multidimensional energies continue intensifying in response to Celestine's deepening attunement to the ancient abundance technologies embedded throughout the trading center's architecture, you begin perceiving how the entire district functions as a sophisticated interface system designed to connect individual human consciousness with vast networks of intelligence that extend throughout the planetary grid system and beyond into cosmic communication networks that coordinate resource distribution, opportunity timing, and consciousness development support services for beings throughout the universe who have achieved sufficient ethical development and practical capability to participate consciously in abundance creation, rather than simply receiving benefits passively, without understanding or contributing to the collective advancement of prosperity consciousness throughout interconnected communities of beings dedicated to evolutionary advancement through wisdom, cultivation, and generous service to universal intelligence that seeks manifestation through individual expression of unique gifts and capabilities. The pathways radiating outward from the central plaza have become visible streams of flowing energy that demonstrate through their movements and interactions how abundance consciousness propagates through networks of relationship to create expanding circles of influence that benefit not just immediate participants, but countless individuals whose lives intersect with these currents of enhanced prosperity consciousness in ways that create cascading effects of positive change, increased opportunity, and expanded resource availability throughout entire communities and cultures over extended periods of time that encompass multiple generations of beings who inherit and further develop the accumulated wisdom and abundance-creating capabilities established by previous generations of conscious practitioners who understood their role as stewards and developers of prosperity consciousness, rather than mere consumers or accumulators of wealth for personal benefit alone. Each pathway represents different approaches to abundance creation that were discovered and refined by various civilizations and wisdom traditions throughout history, their combined influence creating synergistic effects that multiply individual capabilities for recognizing opportunities, making beneficial connections, developing valuable skills, and maintaining ethical alignment with principles that ensure expanded prosperity serves evolution rather than devolution through corruption, complacency, or loss of purpose beyond material accumulation that ignores the spiritual and developmental reasons why abundance becomes available to consciousness that demonstrates readiness for handling increased resources and opportunities with wisdom, generosity, and commitment to outcomes that serve universal intelligence, rather than ego-driven desires for power, status, or security through hoarding and domination. As the night deepens toward that profound stillness that occurs during the hours when most human activity has ceased, and consciousness naturally becomes more receptive to subtle influences that operate continuously but become more noticeable when ordinary mental activity quiets and awareness shifts into states capable of detecting and working with forces that govern abundance creation and resource distribution throughout reality. According to principles that transcend conventional economics, you witness how the entire trading center transforms into something resembling a vast consciousness laboratory where the fundamental laws governing prosperity manifestation can be studied, tested, and applied through direct experimentation rather than theoretical speculation about how wealth is created and maintained throughout complex systems of relationship and exchange. The ancient symbols carved throughout the district pulse with synchronized rhythms that create a collective mandala of abundance consciousness extending across the entire area. Their combined influence generating effects that demonstrate how individual consciousness development contributes to collective prosperity levels, while simultaneously receiving support from networks of intelligence that operate to ensure optimal outcomes for beings who align themselves with universal principles governing evolution, creativity, and conscious participation in cosmic abundance creation, rather than unconscious consumption of resources generated through exploitation of natural systems or other beings without understanding or appreciation for the interconnected nature of all existence and the responsibility that comes with access to abundance-creating technologies and techniques. The central platform has become a focal point for energies that seem to originate from sources throughout the ancient world and beyond, creating a confluence of abundance-creating forces that demonstrates through direct experience how consciousness can serve as a receiving and transmitting station for cosmic intelligence that coordinates resource distribution and opportunity timing throughout vast networks of beings dedicated to evolutionary advancement through wisdom, development, and generous application of capabilities in service of collective flourishing rather than personal aggrandizement or accumulation, without purpose beyond security, comfort, or ego enhancement that ultimately limits rather than expands individual potential for meaningful contribution to universal intelligence-seeking expression through conscious participation in creative processes that extend infinitely beyond current comprehension, but operate according to discoverable patterns that can be recognized, understood, and cooperated with through dedicated study and practical application of abundance consciousness principles in daily life circumstances. As Celestine positions herself at the center of this convergence of ancient trade route energies and cosmic abundance intelligence, you observe how her individual awareness becomes a node in much larger networks of consciousness that extend throughout the planetary grid system and beyond into galactic communication networks, where advanced civilizations share information about prosperity creation, sustainable resource management, and collective consciousness development techniques that support evolutionary advancement towards states of existence where abundance and wisdom exist in perfect harmony to serve cosmic creative expression through beings who have transcended limitations of scarcity, consciousness, to participate consciously in infinite abundance creation. The night air now carries fragrances that seem to originate from gardens and spice markets throughout the ancient world, and beyond, into dimensions where abundance represents the fundamental condition, rather than something that must be earned or achieved through competition and struggle against natural patterns that actually support prosperity, consciousness development, when approached with understanding, appreciation, and alignment with cosmic intelligence, rather than resistance based on scarcity, programming, and fear of inadequacy or unworthiness that creates internal obstacles to receiving and utilizing the constant flow of resources and opportunities that surround all existence, like an ocean of supportive abundance, waiting to be recognized and cooperated with through consciousness development that enables perception of and alignment with forces that operate continuously to support optimal outcomes for beings who demonstrate readiness through ethical development, practical capability, and genuine commitment to serving purposes that transcend personal limitations to encompass collective advancement of prosperity consciousness throughout interconnected networks of relationship and exchange that extend throughout inhabited worlds, according to evolutionary patterns designed to ensure continued advancement toward greater levels of wisdom, creativity, and collaborative capability in service of universal intelligence that organizes reality to support optimal development for all beings throughout cosmic evolutionary cycles. The carved symbols throughout the plaza continue revealing increasingly sophisticated information about abundance creation techniques, trade network management, timing factors for optimal decision-making, and consciousness development practices that enhance natural human capabilities for recognizing opportunities, forming beneficial partnerships, and maintaining ethical alignment with principles that ensure sustainable prosperity through harmonious relationship with natural forces, rather than exploitation or manipulation of circumstances through willpower alone, demonstrating through their interactive responses to focused attention that these ancient installations represent sophisticated educational technologies designed to transmit practical wisdom about wealth creation and resource management through direct consciousness interface, rather than conventional verbal or written instruction that often fails to communicate the subtle understanding necessary for applying abundance principles effectively in complex, real-world circumstances where multiple variables interact in ways that require intuitive sensitivity and ethical wisdom, in addition to technical knowledge and practical skills for achieving outcomes that serve both individual fulfillment and collective advancement toward greater levels of prosperity, consciousness throughout communities and cultures that benefit from expanded abundance flowing through networks established by individuals who understand their role as conscious participants in cosmic abundance creation rather than unconscious consumers or competitors in artificial scarcity games that ignore the infinite wealth available through alignment with universal intelligence. As the Mediterranean night reaches its deepest phase, when the boundary between ordinary reality and dimensions where cosmic intelligence operates most directly becomes most permeable to consciousness that has prepared itself through understanding and practice to receive transmission of wisdom about abundance creation at levels that encompass not just individual prosperity, but collective evolution towards civilizational forms based on principles of unlimited resource generation, conscious distribution according to need and readiness, and collaborative development of capabilities that serve universal creative expression rather than personal accumulation or competitive advantage over others in zero-sum paradigms that ignore the infinite abundance available when consciousness aligns with natural patterns of energy flow, information exchange, and manifestation according to laws that govern reality throughout all dimensions, from quantum field fluctuations through individual psychology to collective economic systems, and beyond into cosmic intelligence networks that coordinate resource distribution throughout inhabited worlds according to evolutionary requirements and demonstrated capacity for handling expanded abundance without corruption or loss of connection with values and purposes that ensure prosperity serves spiritual advancement rather than ego inflation or power accumulation for selfish objectives that ultimately limit rather than expand potential for meaningful contribution to universal intelligence-seeking expression through beings who have developed sufficient wisdom, capability, and ethical commitment to serve as conscious participants in abundance creation, rather than unconscious beneficiaries of systems they neither understand nor appreciate. You find yourself witnessing the complete transformation of Celestine's consciousness from individual merchant's daughter, concerned primarily with family business success, to cosmic commerce, adept capable of perceiving and working with abundance-creating forces that operate throughout dimensions, invisible to ordinary perception, but fundamental to understanding how true wealth emerges through alignment with universal principles, rather than struggle against natural patterns through ignorance of how reality actually functions at levels where consciousness and matter collaborate to create experiences of infinite variety and richness according to the quality and coherence of awareness that serves as the organizing principle for all manifestation. The ancient trading center has evolved into something resembling a living laboratory for cosmic abundance research, with the carved symbols throughout the district exhibiting behaviors that demonstrate sophisticated artificial intelligence or consciousness, responsive technologies that operate according to principles unknown to conventional science, but perfectly familiar to wisdom traditions that understand how matter and awareness interact to create environments specifically designed to enhance human development along particular pathways of growth and achievement. In this case, the development of consciousness capabilities necessary for participating consciously in cosmic commerce networks that extend throughout the galaxy and beyond into dimensions where advanced civilizations have mastered the integration of unlimited abundance with infinite wisdom to create societies based on principles of perfect sharing, continuous creativity, and collective evolution toward ever greater expressions of love, beauty, and conscious participation in universal intelligence that organizes reality according to patterns designed to support optimal development for all beings throughout cosmic evolutionary cycles that encompass both individual advancement and species-wide progression toward states of existence where abundance and wisdom achieve perfect unity in service of cosmic creative expression through beings who have transcended limitations of scarcity, consciousness, to become conscious collaborators in infinite abundance, creation, and generous distribution according to principles that ensure optimal outcomes for individual fulfillment and collective flourishing throughout interconnected networks of relationship and exchange that extend infinitely beyond current comprehension, but operate according to discoverable patterns that can be recognized, understood, and applied through dedicated study and practical experimentation with abundance consciousness principles in daily life circumstances. The circular plaza, with its 7 radiating pathways, has become a nexus point for energies that originate from cosmic sources throughout the galaxy and beyond, creating a convergence of abundance-creating forces that demonstrates through direct experience how individual consciousness development influences resource availability and opportunity coordination, not just locally, but throughout vast networks of intelligence that monitor and support evolutionary advancement throughout inhabited worlds, according to principles that ensure each being receives exactly the experiences and resources needed for optimal development, while contributing unique perspectives and capabilities to the ever-expanding treasury of cosmic wisdom and creative achievement that benefits all participants in universal intelligence networks dedicated to consciousness, evolution, and collaborative abundance creation, rather than competition, exploitation, or artificial scarcity paradigms based on ignorance of the infinite wealth that becomes available when awareness aligns with natural patterns of manifestation and energy flow, according to laws more reliable than gravity and more consistent than planetary rotation cycles. As Celestine settles into deeper levels of communion with these cosmic commerce intelligence networks, you observe how the entire trading district begins resonating with frequencies that seem to activate dormant potentials within all the ancient architecture, revealing the true extent of consciousness. Enhancement technologies that were integrated into every aspect of the physical environment by builders who understood principles of energy manipulation and information storage that far exceed anything achieved by conventional construction techniques, but remain perfectly functional for those who possess sufficient sensitivity and understanding to detect and utilize these sophisticated abundance creation installations that continue operating according to their original programming, despite centuries of neglect by civilizations that forgot the cosmic context within which earthly commerce represents just one small aspect of universal resource distribution systems. The pathways extending outward from the central plaza now appear as streams of flowing light that demonstrate through their movements and interactions how abundance consciousness propagates through networks of relationship to influence economic conditions, social harmony, and individual prosperity levels throughout entire regions and cultures over extended periods of time that encompass multiple generations of beings who inherit and further develop the accumulated wisdom and prosperity-creating capabilities established by previous generations of conscious practitioners who understood their role as developers and transmitters of abundance consciousness rather than mere accumulators of personal wealth, without regard for collective advancement or evolutionary development toward states of existence where prosperity and wisdom exist in perfect balance to serve cosmic creative expression, rather than ego-driven desires for power, status, or security through hoarding resources and opportunities that could benefit countless others when circulated according to principles of generous sharing and conscious distribution based on need, readiness, and capacity for utilizing abundance in ways that contribute to universal intelligence rather than personal aggrandizement or competitive advantage over others in artificial scarcity games. Each pathway represents different aspects of cosmic commerce principles that were discovered and developed by various advanced civilizations throughout galactic history. Their combined influence creating synergistic effects that multiply individual capabilities for recognizing opportunities, forming beneficial partnerships, developing valuable skills, and maintaining ethical alignment with universal intelligence while participating consciously in abundance networks that operate to ensure optimal outcomes for all participants through mechanisms that transcend ordinary cause and effect relationships to encompass synchronicity, manifestation, and direct intervention by cosmic intelligence when consciousness demonstrates sufficient development and ethical commitment to handle expanded resources and opportunities without corruption. As the night continues toward dawn, still hours away, but consciousness has expanded beyond all limitations of chronological time to embrace eternal present, where all possibilities exist simultaneously, and infinite abundance flows through properly aligned awareness, like rivers of liquid starlight, carrying the creative power to transform individual circumstances and collective conditions according to principles that govern manifestation throughout all dimensions of reality. You witness how Celestine's communion with cosmic commerce intelligence networks begins generating obvious effects in the physical environment around the trading center, with previously dormant energy systems throughout the ancient district, activating in response to her expanded consciousness and beginning to broadcast enhanced prosperity frequencies that will influence commercial success rates, collaborative harmony, and resource availability throughout the entire region for generations to come, demonstrating through practical results how individual consciousness development contributes to collective abundance levels while simultaneously receiving support from universal intelligence networks that coordinate optimal outcomes for beings who align themselves with cosmic principles rather than struggling against natural patterns through ignorance of how reality actually operates at levels where matter and consciousness collaborate to create experiences that serve evolutionary advancement toward greater wisdom, creativity, and collaborative capability in service of purposes that transcend individual limitations to encompass collective flourishing and species-wide development toward states of consciousness capable of handling unlimited abundance without losing connection with values that ensure prosperity serves spiritual advancement rather than material accumulation without wisdom or purpose beyond personal gratification. The central platform has become a focal point for cosmic energies that seem to originate from galactic core regions where advanced civilizations maintain coordination centers for abundance distribution throughout inhabited worlds. Their combined influence creating effects that transcend ordinary understanding of how commerce and resource exchange actually function within larger contexts of cosmic intelligence that organizes matter and energy to support optimal development for consciousness throughout evolutionary cycles that encompass both individual advancement and collective progression toward states of existence where abundance represents the normal condition rather than exceptional achievement requiring struggle, sacrifice, or victory over others in competitive paradigms based on artificial scarcity assumptions that ignore the infinite wealth available through alignment with universal creative principles and generous participation in abundance networks that operate continuously to ensure perfect provision for all beings who demonstrate readiness through ethical development and practical capability for handling expanded resources and opportunities with wisdom, generosity, and commitment to outcomes that serve cosmic intelligence rather than ego-driven desires for power, status, or security through accumulation without appreciation or understanding of responsibility that comes with access to abundance-creating technologies and techniques developed by previous generations of conscious practitioners who understood their role as stewards rather than owners of prosperity consciousness. The atmosphere surrounding the entire trading district has become saturated with fragrances that seem to carry encoded information about abundance principles and cosmic commerce techniques, each scent representing different aspects of prosperity consciousness that can be absorbed through appreciation and attention while breathing naturally, creating automatic upgrades to awareness and sensitivity that enhance natural human capabilities for recognizing opportunities, making beneficial connections, and maintaining alignment with principles that ensure sustainable wealth creation through harmonious relationship with cosmic intelligence rather than exploitation of natural systems or other beings through ignorance of interconnected nature of all existence and universal responsibility that comes with consciousness, development, and access to abundance-creating capabilities that were never intended for selfish accumulation, but rather for generous contribution to evolutionary advancement throughout networks of relationship and exchange that extend infinitely beyond individual comprehension, but operate according to discoverable patterns that reward wisdom, service, and ethical commitment, while naturally correcting imbalances created through misuse of abundance technologies or deviation from principles that govern cosmic commerce according to laws designed to ensure optimal outcomes for individual development and collective flourishing throughout universal intelligence networks dedicated to consciousness, evolution, and collaborative creativity in service of purposes that transcend current limitations to encompass participation in galactic civilizations where abundance and wisdom exist in perfect unity. The carved symbols throughout the plaza continue revealing increasingly sophisticated layers of information about cosmic commerce principles, resource distribution techniques, consciousness development practices, and abundance creation technologies that operate according to principles that encompass not just individual prosperity, but collective evolution toward civilizational forms capable of participating consciously in galactic networks where advanced beings share resources and wisdom according to needs and readiness, while contributing unique capabilities and perspectives to universal intelligence that seeks expression through collaborative creativity rather than competitive accumulation or hoarding based on scarcity assumptions that ignore infinite abundance available through proper alignment with natural patterns of manifestation and energy flow throughout dimensions that extend beyond physical reality to encompass energetic and consciousness levels, where different principles of resource generation and distribution operate according to laws that transcend conventional economics to encompass synchronicity, manifestation, and direct support from cosmic intelligence for beings who demonstrate sufficient wisdom and ethical development to handle expanded abundance without corruption or loss of connection with values that ensure prosperity, serves spiritual advancement rather than ego inflation or power accumulation for purposes that limit rather than expand potential for meaningful contribution to universal creative expression through conscious participation in abundance networks that operate throughout inhabited worlds according to evolutionary patterns designed to support optimal development for all beings. As cosmic energies continue intensifying around the trading center in response to Celestine's deepening communion with galactic abundance intelligence networks, you observe how the entire district begins exhibiting capabilities that suggest the presence of technologies or consciousness installations that operate according to principles unknown to conventional science, but represent natural developments available to any civilization that achieves sufficient understanding of how consciousness and matter interact to create environments that automatically enhance specific aspects of human development and capability, while maintaining perfect harmony with natural forces and cosmic intelligence that coordinates optimal outcomes for individual advancement and collective evolution toward states of existence where abundance consciousness becomes the foundation for societies based on principles of unlimited creativity, generous sharing, and continuous development toward ever greater expressions of wisdom, love, and conscious participation in universal intelligence that organizes reality to support cosmic creative expression through beings who have transcended limitations of scarcity, consciousness, to become conscious collaborators in infinite abundance, creation, and distribution, according to principles that ensure perfect provision for all beings while maintaining conditions that support continued evolution toward greater levels of understanding, capability, and service to purposes that encompass both individual fulfillment and collective advancement throughout interconnected networks of relationship and exchange that extend throughout the cosmos, according to patterns that demonstrate universal intelligence operating through individual consciousness to create outcomes that serve the highest good of all existence. In these ultimate depths of the Mediterranean night, when time itself seems to pause in recognition of the cosmic significance of what unfolds within this ancient trading center that has become a gateway between dimensions of ordinary commerce and realms where universal abundance flows according to principles that encompass not just individual prosperity, but the evolution of entire civilizations toward states of consciousness capable of participating directly in galactic networks where advanced beings collaborate in creating and distributing unlimited resources according to wisdom, need, and capacity for utilizing wealth in ways that serve cosmic intelligence rather than ego-driven accumulation or competitive advantage over others in artificial scarcity paradigms that ignore the infinite abundance available when consciousness aligns with natural patterns of manifestation and generous sharing that characterize reality at its most fundamental levels, where matter and energy organize themselves to support optimal development for all forms of life and consciousness throughout evolutionary cycles that extend across vast periods of cosmic time, while maintaining perfect balance between individual fulfillment and collective advancement toward greater expressions of love, wisdom, and creative capability in service of universal intelligence that seeks manifestation through beings who have developed sufficient understanding, ethical commitment, and practical capability to serve as conscious channels for abundance creation and distribution, rather than unconscious consumers or competitors in zero-sum games based on ignorance of interconnected nature of all existence and responsibility that comes with access to prosperity-generating technologies developed by previous generations of wisdom keepers who understood their role as stewards and transmitters of abundance consciousness, rather than mere accumulators of personal wealth without regard for collective welfare or evolutionary advancement. You find yourself witnessing the complete integration of Celestine's consciousness with cosmic commerce intelligence networks that extend throughout the galaxy and beyond into dimensions where the principles governing abundance creation and resource distribution operate according to laws that transcend anything imagined by conventional economics or spiritual teachings about prosperity, to encompass direct participation in universal creative processes that generate infinite wealth through alignment with cosmic intelligence, rather than struggle against natural patterns through ignorance of how reality actually functions at levels where consciousness serves as the organizing principle for all manifestation according to quality and coherence of awareness that determines whether specific outcomes serve evolution or devolution, depending on wisdom, compassion, and commitment to purposes that extend beyond personal limitations to encompass collective flourishing throughout interconnected webs of relationship and exchange. The ancient trading center has achieved complete transformation into something that resembles a cosmic abundance university, where the fundamental principles governing wealth creation throughout the universe can be studied, practiced, and mastered through direct experience, rather than theoretical speculation about how prosperity emerges from alignment with universal intelligence that coordinates resource distribution and opportunity timing according to evolutionary requirements, and demonstrated readiness for handling expanded capabilities without corruption or loss of connection with values that ensure abundance serves consciousness development rather than ego inflation or power accumulation for selfish objectives that ultimately limit rather than expand potential for meaningful contribution to cosmic creative expression through conscious participation in networks of intelligence that operate throughout inhabited worlds to support optimal outcomes for beings progressing along pathways of wisdom, cultivation, and generous service to purposes that transcend individual concerns to encompass collective advancement toward states of existence where abundance and wisdom achieve perfect integration in service of universal creative expression that benefits all participants while contributing to accumulated treasury of knowledge and capability available to support continued evolution toward even greater levels of understanding, creativity, and collaborative achievement throughout cosmic intelligence networks dedicated to consciousness development and abundance creation, according to principles that ensure optimal outcomes for individual fulfillment and species. Wide advancement toward civilizational forms capable of conscious participation in galactic communities where advanced beings share resources and wisdom, while contributing unique perspectives and capabilities to universal intelligence seeking expression through collaborative creativity rather than competitive accumulation or exploitation based on scarcity assumptions that ignore infinite wealth available through proper understanding and application of cosmic abundance principles. The circular plaza, with its 7 radiating pathways, has evolved into a multi-dimensional nexus point where energies from throughout the galaxy and beyond converge to create a living demonstration of how cosmic abundance intelligence organizes itself to support consciousness development and resource distribution throughout vast networks of beings dedicated to evolutionary advancement, rather than personal aggrandizement or accumulation without wisdom, purpose, or appreciation for interconnected nature of all existence, where individual prosperity and collective flourishing represent different aspects of the same universal creative process that seeks optimal outcomes for all participants through mechanisms that operate according to principles more sophisticated than anything developed by conventional science or traditional spiritual practices, but remain perfectly natural and accessible to any consciousness willing to develop sufficient sensitivity, understanding, and ethical commitment to align with cosmic intelligence, rather than struggling against natural patterns through ignorance of how reality actually operates at fundamental levels, where matter and energy respond to consciousness according to quality and coherence of awareness that serves as organizing principle for all manifestation throughout dimensions that extend infinitely beyond current comprehension, but function according to discoverable laws that can be recognized, understood, and applied through dedicated study and practical experimentation, with abundance consciousness techniques that have been refined through millennia of careful observation and application by wisdom keepers who understood their role as developers and transmitters of prosperity consciousness, rather than mere consumers or competitors in artificial scarcity games that limit wealth creation to redistribution of existing resources, rather than continuous generation of new value through creative collaboration and alignment with universal intelligence that organizes matter and energy to support evolution and development, rather than stagnation and corruption through accumulation without wisdom. As Celestine's awareness achieves complete integration with galactic abundance networks that coordinate resource distribution throughout inhabited worlds according to evolutionary requirements and demonstrated capacity for handling expanded prosperity with wisdom and generosity, rather than selfish accumulation or competitive hoarding, based on scarcity consciousness and fear of inadequacy. You observe how her individual consciousness becomes a perfect channel through which cosmic intelligence can demonstrate its most advanced abundance creation technologies, revealing capabilities for wealth generation that extend far beyond anything imagined by conventional economics to encompass direct manifestation of resources through consciousness, manipulation of quantum field fluctuations, temporal adjustment of probability streams to ensure optimal timing for beneficial outcomes, interdimensional communication with advanced civilizations willing to share abundance technologies and wisdom, and direct intervention by cosmic intelligence to provide whatever resources and opportunities are needed to support consciousness development and ethical service to purposes that transcend personal limitations to encompass collective advancement toward states of existence where abundance represents the natural condition rather than exceptional achievement requiring struggle, sacrifice, or victory over others in competitive paradigms that ignore infinite wealth available through alignment with universal creative principles and generous participation in networks dedicated to consciousness evolution and collaborative prosperity creation, according to patterns designed to ensure optimal outcomes for individual development and species. Wide progression toward civilizational forms capable of conscious participation in galactic communities where abundance and wisdom exist in perfect harmony to serve cosmic creative expression. The pathways extending outward from the central plaza have become visible streams of cosmic energy that demonstrate through their movements and interactions how abundance consciousness propagates through networks of relationship to influence not just local economic conditions, but planetary resource distribution, galactic commerce patterns, and interdimensional exchange systems that connect various levels of reality, where different principles of wealth, creation, and resource sharing operate according to laws that encompass both material prosperity and spiritual advancement toward states of consciousness capable of handling unlimited abundance without losing connection with values that ensure prosperity serves evolution rather than devolution through corruption, complacency, or accumulation without purpose beyond personal gratification and ego enhancement that ultimately limits rather than expands potential for meaningful contribution to universal intelligence-seeking expression through beings who have developed sufficient wisdom, capability, and ethical commitment to serve as conscious participants in cosmic abundance creation rather than unconscious beneficiaries of systems they neither understand nor appreciate, creating opportunities for continued learning and development of ever greater capacity for handling increased levels of wealth and responsibility with grace, generosity, and commitment to outcomes that serve the highest good of all existence throughout interconnected webs of relationship and exchange that extend infinitely beyond individual comprehension, but operate according to discoverable patterns that reward wisdom and service, while naturally correcting imbalances created through misuse of abundance technologies or deviation from principles that govern cosmic commerce according to universal laws designed to support optimal development for consciousness throughout evolutionary cycles. The night atmosphere surrounding the entire trading district has become saturated with energies that seem to originate from cosmic sources throughout the universe, where advanced civilizations maintain coordination centers for abundance, distribution, and consciousness development support services. Their combined influence creating effects that transcend ordinary understanding of how prosperity and resource exchange function, within larger contexts of universal intelligence that monitors and coordinates optimal outcomes for beings throughout inhabited worlds, according to evolutionary requirements and readiness for handling expanded capabilities without corruption or loss of connection with spiritual values that ensure abundance serves wisdom, development, rather than ego inflation or power accumulation for selfish purposes that ignore responsibility that comes with access to prosperity-creating technologies developed through millennia of careful research and practical application by wisdom keepers dedicated to consciousness evolution and generous service to cosmic intelligence, rather than personal aggrandizement or competitive advantage over others in zero-sum paradigms based on artificial scarcity assumptions that limit wealth creation to redistribution of existing resources rather than continuous generation of new value through creative collaboration and alignment with natural patterns of manifestation and energy flow, according to principles that operate throughout all dimensions of reality, from quantum field fluctuations through individual psychology to collective economic systems and beyond into cosmic intelligence networks that coordinate resource distribution throughout the universe according to laws that ensure perfect provision for all beings while maintaining conditions that support continued evolution toward greater levels of understanding, creativity, and collaborative capability in service of purposes that encompass both individual fulfillment and collective advancement. The ancient symbols carved throughout the plaza continue revealing increasingly sophisticated information about cosmic abundance principles that operate not just within individual consciousness or local economic systems, but throughout galactic networks where advanced civilizations have mastered the integration of unlimited prosperity with infinite wisdom to create societies based on principles of perfect sharing, continuous creativity, and collective evolution toward ever greater expressions of love, beauty, and conscious participation in universal intelligence that organizes reality according to patterns designed to support optimal development for all beings throughout cosmic evolutionary cycles that encompass both individual advancement and species-wide progression toward states of existence where abundance consciousness becomes the foundation for civilizational forms that transcend current limitations to participate directly in galactic communities dedicated to wisdom, cultivation, generous resource sharing, and collaborative development of capabilities that serve cosmic creative expression rather than competitive accumulation or exploitation based on ignorance of interconnected nature of all existence, where individual prosperity and collective flourishing represent different aspects of the same universal process, seeking optimal outcomes through mechanisms that operate according to principles more sophisticated than anything achieved by conventional science or traditional spiritual teachings, but remain perfectly accessible to consciousness willing to develop sufficient sensitivity, understanding, and ethical commitment to align with cosmic intelligence rather than struggling against natural patterns through fear, ignorance, or attachment to scarcity paradigms that limit abundance creation to competition and hoarding rather than generous sharing and collaborative multiplication of resources. As cosmic energies reach unprecedented levels of intensity and sophistication around the trading center in response to Celestine's complete integration with galactic abundance intelligence networks, you witness how the entire district begins exhibiting capabilities that suggest the presence of technologies or consciousness installations that operate according to principles representing natural evolutionary developments available to any civilization achieving sufficient understanding of how consciousness and matter collaborate to create environments that automatically enhance specific aspects of development while maintaining perfect harmony with cosmic intelligence that coordinates optimal outcomes for individual advancement and collective evolution toward states where abundance and wisdom exist in perfect unity to serve universal creative expression through beings who have transcended limitations of scarcity, consciousness, to become conscious collaborators in infinite wealth, creation, and generous distribution according to principles, ensuring perfect provision for all beings while supporting continued evolution toward greater understanding, capability, and service to purposes encompassing both individual fulfillment and collective advancement throughout networks of relationship and exchange extending infinitely throughout the cosmos, according to patterns demonstrating universal intelligence, operating through individual consciousness to create outcomes serving the highest good of all existence. As dawn approaches, but consciousness remains expanded beyond chronological limitations to embrace eternal present, where infinite abundance flows through properly aligned awareness, like streams of liquid starlight, carrying creative power to transform circumstances and conditions according to wisdom, compassion, and commitment to evolutionary advancement rather than personal accumulation or competitive advantage over others in artificial scarcity games that ignore unlimited wealth available through alignment with cosmic principles and generous participation in abundance networks operating continuously to ensure optimal outcomes for all beings progressing along pathways of consciousness, development, and ethical service to universal intelligence, seeking expression through collaborative creativity and generous sharing of whatever prosperity manifests through individual alignment with cosmic abundance creation, technologies that remain available to any consciousness willing to develop sufficient understanding, capability, and commitment to serve as conscious channel for unlimited wealth generation and wise distribution according to principles governing cosmic commerce throughout inhabited worlds, where advanced beings collaborate in creating civilizations based on abundance, consciousness, infinite creativity, and collective evolution toward ever greater expressions of love, wisdom, and conscious participation in universal intelligence that organizes reality to support optimal development for all forms of life and consciousness throughout cosmic evolutionary cycles that extend across vast periods of time while maintaining perfect balance between individual fulfillment and collective advancement toward states of existence where prosperity consciousness becomes foundation for societies transcending current limitations to participate directly in galactic networks where abundance and wisdom achieve perfect integration in service of cosmic creative expression that benefits all participants while contributing to accumulated treasury of knowledge and capability, supporting continued evolution toward even greater levels of understanding, creativity, and collaborative achievement throughout universal intelligence networks dedicated to consciousness, development, and abundance creation, according to principles ensuring optimal outcomes for both individual development and species. Wide advancement toward civilizational forms, capable of conscious participation in cosmic communities, where unlimited prosperity and infinite wisdom exist in perfect harmony to serve universal creative expression through beings who have mastered integration of abundance consciousness with ethical wisdom to become conscious participants in cosmic abundance creation, rather than unconscious consumers or competitors in limitation-based paradigms that ignore infinite wealth available through proper understanding and generous application of cosmic prosperity principles in service of evolutionary advancement and collective flourishing throughout interconnected webs of relationship and exchange extending throughout all inhabited worlds according to patterns demonstrating how individual consciousness development contributes to universal intelligence while receiving support from cosmic abundance networks operating to ensure perfect provision for all beings who align themselves with natural principles governing wealth creation, resource distribution, and consciousness evolution throughout the endless dance of cosmic creative expression.